me out. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak this morning. The last time I was in China, I was here in 2013 as the chairman of the Financial Accounting Standards Board to meet with the Ministry of Finance to discuss the convergence of accounting standards. And it is an absolute pleasure for me to be back here today to talk about XBRL and how it can be used to enhance financial reporting around the world. Bob, thank you for those kind words of introduction. As Bob said, I've done many different kinds of things in my career, from auditing to standard setting to serving in industry. And now I serve on 2 public company boards and I chair the audit committees for both of them. So I have seen financial reporting from a number of different perspectives. I'm here today as a bit of a cheerleader. I'm going to talk about my journey with XBRL and how I think it can make financial reporting and financial information more efficient and more effective. I hope sharing my experience with you today will be helpful and inspiring to those of you who aren't yet convinced of the power of XBRL. My remarks today reflect my own experiences and my own opinions and should not be attributed to any of the organizations that I am associated with, either in the past or currently. A common thread in my career has been to try to make financial reporting as transparent as possible, regardless of the particular role that I happen to be in at the time. I've always been deeply committed to excellence in financial reporting because I think that timely, reliable, and relevant information is what makes the capital markets work efficiently, and it helps investors make informed decisions about where to invest their money. I first got involved with XBRL at the U.S. Financial Accounting Standards Board in the early 2000s, when the FASB took on the responsibility of developing the U.S. GAAP XBRL taxonomy at the request of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Back then, the way it worked was for the technical accountants like me to figure out how to account for something, and then we'd take that and hand it off to our XBRL team to figure out what the appropriate tag should be in the taxonomy. The FASB always got, and I know continues to get, a lot of input about how to account for things, but we got very little input about the proposed XBRL taxonomy. The companies and preparers generally saw XBRL as being an additional cost with no benefit to them. And they thought no one was using their XBRL files, so why should they spend the time focusing on that? Most preparers then finished closing their books, signed off on the accounts, and then handed off those files to their IT team to figure out again what the appropriate tags should be for their filings of XBRL. And so the problem with that is that there were very few people within a company who understood both the accounting standards and the XBRL taxonomy, which I think limited their ability to comment effectively to the FASB on how the taxonomy should be arranged. The FASB got even less input from the users of financial statements on the XBRL taxonomy. And by users, I mean people like the data aggregators or the investors. I think these folks kind of liked the fact that they had a competitive advantage working with the massive amounts of information that took an awful lot of work to find and work through. So they were able to sell their services to others who were either too busy to do it themselves, or perhaps they lacked the sophistication to do it properly. And so, with very little input, we did our best at the FASB to try to merge the accounting standard setting process with the development of a robust XBRL taxonomy to lay the groundwork for digital reporting in the United States. When I left the FASB in 2013, I went to work for a university in New York City called Pace University to set up a Center for Excellence in Financial Reporting. In 2017, I was trying to put together a conference on how companies and others were using technology to innovate in the area of financial reporting. And And so I started calling around to get examples of cases where people thought there were innovators. I called a friend of mine at the SEC, or the Securities and Exchange Commission, and he suggested that I reach out to a company called Idacity, who was working with XBRL to try to build a platform or software to help make it more understandable and more usable by people who were trying to access digital financial statements. So I called Idacity and set up a meeting, and once I saw a demo of the product, and I saw how easy it was to work with digital financial statements using a good inline viewer and API, I immediately understood and could see the power of XBRL, and I started to realize the potential of what could be done with this powerful combination of data and technology. So I volunteered on the spot to advise the company, and that's really what has brought me here today. So I have to disclose for you that I am an advisor to Idacity, and I may refer to Idacity throughout this presentation because it's the technology that I'm most familiar with. As a former standard setter and now a director, I could immediately see many ways that a professional who conducts financial research could use digital financial statements effectively. For example, as a corporate director of 2 public companies, I frequently find myself wondering how my company compares to other companies in our peer group in terms of things like financial performance, the assumptions we're using in various estimates, how others are explaining an issue in their footnotes, or even whether any company has disclosed a cyber breach, for example. I used to need a team of people to help me identify the terms to search, go into the company's filings or websites, and sort through massive amounts of information, and then prepare a report for me to review and figure out how to interpret it. Now, I can do all of this myself in mere seconds. I have alerts set up on my Idacity platform for my companies and their peer groups, and I know real time when any corporate transaction has taken place or a filing has been submitted, and I can easily research any issue within that group of companies or any other set of companies. When I have a more general question, such as what other companies are disclosing how they account for cloud computing costs, I can search the entire Edgar database in a matter of seconds, and then be taken to a list of companies that have disclosed that item and click through to find exactly what they have disclosed about it, again, in seconds. So to me, I think that any accountant, auditor, or regulator would find this functionality to be extremely informative and efficient, and I've been telling everyone I know to learn more about it. Another use case that immediately sprung to mind for me was any business that ingests massive amounts of data to do deep analysis of one company or to analyze and compare across companies, peer groups, or sectors. Investment professionals are clearly one potential power user of XBRL. But so is any other business, academic institution, or regulator that does deep analysis on specific companies or comparisons of a set of peers. Once you set up the group of companies that you want to follow, your spreadsheets are automatically updated as the companies issue new financial information. I remember when I was an accountant at JP Morgan back in the 1980s and the 1990s, we had a whole team of people whose job it was to do peer analysis. I don't know how they do it today, but with XBRL, I imagine that almost all of those people could be redeployed to analyze the information instead of process it, or to do something altogether different. I think this image is a great metaphor for life before XBRL. You can go through the cash lane if you want to, but why would you when you can breeze through it with the electronic toll lane or Easy Pass? I think anyone who has seen a demo of XBRL using an excellent interface can see the benefit immediately and can't imagine life before their Easy Pass. XBRL helps you do your job significantly faster, more flexibly, and undoubtedly with less cost and effort. I know that many companies have automated the process of gathering data and populating their models and spreadsheets, which they also call spreading. Now, I accept that that's better than doing it manually, but why would you continue to do that when you can directly ingest data from the source documents in the form of XBRL? Well, it turns out that there are actually some good reasons why a power user might not yet want to use direct feeds of the information that they need to do their jobs. What are some of those reasons? Well, first, XBRL might not be available in their jurisdiction. Second, it might not have reached a level of reliability that the user is comfortable with, and the process of checking it or normalizing it is still very onerous or expensive. Third, in jurisdictions where XBRL has been implemented and the processes are mature, the user might not be aware of the available data sets or the new technologies that can be used to significantly streamline their processes. So, they continue to have to cancel their plans for the weekend when financial statements are released, search to find the data, scrape it, spread it, review it, check it, and then map it into their own models and spreadsheets. When reliable XBRL data is available, a user can fully realize its benefits if the data is easy to find and access, it's set up and updated as soon as the company issues new financial information, the source documents are easily traceable, the reporting company has the appropriate expertise and is running quality checks before submitting its filings, and the company has anchored its tags in the taxonomy so that the user can understand and compare the information that they see. And of course, the user needs good technology to ingest and work with that data. And that turns out to be the experience of Moodys Investors Service, where I serve on the board of directors. Moodys is using XBRL in jurisdictions where the process has reached a certain maturity level, such as in the United States with the SEC's Edgar data, and it has been a real success. As you can imagine, Moodys ingests vast amounts of data in connection with every bond that it rates in order to determine the credit rating for that issuer. In my discussions with the Moodys team, they report that by receiving direct feeds of XBRL data and using an inline viewer, they've realized many benefits. For example, they've maintained their high level of accuracy, and the amount of time that it takes to process each filing has been significantly reduced. The fact that the filings are automatically ingested as soon as they are filed by the company minimizes the significant spike in activity around quarterly reporting periods. Professionals who used to handle data intake can now work on analysis, not processing. And once the interface is set up, there is virtually no incremental cost of accessing additional data elements in the database. So for a global power user like Moodys, the more jurisdictions that mandate XBRL, the better. So does that mean that we no longer need data handlers or middlemen? I think the answer is no. Data providers and aggregators can still add value to data quality, and they can provide the technology that's necessary to make the data understandable and usable. For example, in jurisdictions that are still coming onto XBRL, they can help identify inconsistencies and normalize the data that's submitted by filers. And they can reconcile between different accounting and regulatory reporting regimes and address any language differences. The key is, once the jurisdiction reaches a certain level of maturity, you should only be paying someone else to make the data more usable and interactive, not just to access it. I've always thought about the financial reporting process as an ecosystem made up of the companies or filers who report on their financial position and performance, the auditors who provide assurance as to the accuracy of that information, the investors and analysts who use the information and make recommendations and investment decisions about the companies, and the regulators who determine what information has to be provided, how often, where, in what format, and they enforce compliance with those rules. XBRL and other technology enables financial reporting and analysis. It is not an end in itself, and we all have a role to play in fully realizing the benefits. I'd like to share a few observations and suggestions that I have for each of the key members of the financial reporting ecosystem for you to consider. Let me start with the filers, or the companies that provide financial reporting. In jurisdictions that are already using XBRL, companies need to understand and accept that their XBRL filings are being read by regulators, data aggregators, and investors. And the machine-readable files are fueling the capital markets and the regulatory review processes. Investors are increasingly relying on this information, and your company does not want someone to make an erroneous recommendation or decision based on inaccurate tagging. The reputational and financial consequences of this could be very significant. So let me give you a few suggestions on how to avoid that problem. First, I think that companies need to view the human-readable and the machine-readable filings as one and the same, and subject them both to the same high-quality processes and controls. Many tools are available to check your filings before they're submitted to your regulator, and you should use them. 2, even if your financial reporting systems have embedded XBRL technology, you need to own the quality of your tagging, because you're in the best position to select the right tags and elements. That means that your financial reporting people have to understand both accounting and XBRL, and that might mean that they need some additional training. Third, only use extensions when a suitable tag does not exist, and then make sure you anchor them in the taxonomy. I think that unnecessary use of extensions is a sign of poor financial reporting, and it also adds complexity to the users of the financial information. 4, even though it may not currently be required, I suggest that you have some assurance or an independent review around your tagging. I think investors assume that this information is already being audited. And I personally think that a review of the tags should be built into the standard audit processes. Now, I don't understand the legalities of the boundaries of the PCAOB, but that's my personal opinion. And I do want to share with you that for both of the companies where I chair the audit committee, I have suggested that we start receiving explicit assurance on the tags in filings going forward. 5th, I think that companies should tag all of the information that investors want to use, not limit themselves to what's required. You want to make it easy for investors and analysts to find and use your data. I think it helps a company control its narrative or tell the story they want to tell by directing people to your disclosures and your explanations all in the same place, so that they have the story at their fingertips when they're doing their research. Now let me turn to investors and other market participants. As more jurisdictions implement XBRL, you investors will be able to use great technology to help you gather the data, feed your models, and analyze it as soon as it's filed, at a fraction of the cost and effort of doing it manually or of paying someone else to do it for you. Using XBRL will expand your bandwidth so that you can go deeper on the companies that you already cover, but it'll also free you up to cover more companies if you choose to do that. You can easily follow any company that tags its data, even if the underlying accounting standards are not exactly the same. Software like Idacity can bridge between different accounting standards and also different regulatory regimes. With respect to the future, we know that investors use information beyond the audited financial statements and other regulatory filings to make investment decisions. Did you know that 84% of the market value of the S&P 500 represents intangible assets, and most of that value is not captured in the financial statements? So this goes to the point that Jay was just making, that information such as key performance indicators, sustainability measures, and non-GAAP information are informing those valuations, but they are not subject to the same processes and controls as the audited financial statements. So investors, don't be shy about telling the filers and the regulators what you need. In my experience, companies will provide the information that their investors request, and all of it can be tagged. Now let me turn to the regulators and policymakers. First, I want to give credit where it's due and say thank you to the regulators who started us down this path well before investors and others were demanding this information. As a former policymaker who has no current authority, I humbly offer my suggestions based on my past experience and my recent experience with XBRL. Let me start by saying that in order to realize the full benefits of XBRL, users must be able to trust the accuracy of the data. They simply won't use it if they don't trust it. So to me, that's job one. I think it would be helpful for regulators to clarify that XBRL filings will be held to the same standards of accuracy as other financial information. I would suggest that you publicize that you are checking quality and will reject filings that have mistakes in them. Now, ideally, we don't want this to be a gotcha situation. I prefer if we start by giving companies suggestions on how to check their accuracy, and then we give them a little bit of lead time to address these issues. But then the expectation should be clear and there should be consequences. Second, I think that making the data accessible and easy to find in a central repository is crucial if you want all market participants to benefit from the efficiencies of this technology. I think giving all investors easy access to reliable data about public companies is a great equalizer, and it helps the markets function efficiently. Doing this in the United States has greatly simplified the research process for investors because they only have to go to one place to find the original source documents aggregated in one database. Regarding the future, I encourage the regulators and policymakers to work with investors and other market participants to consider what other information should be standardized, tagged, and subject to independent review. I fully appreciate that these are important, complex policy decisions, and they warrant careful consideration. But it seems clear to me that some of this information is being used to make investment decisions. So it seems appropriate to me to subject it to similar standards of care. I think this quote from Ray Dalio, who is the founder of Bridgewater Associates, a massive hedge fund in the United States, is really appropriate to sum up my thoughts on XBRL. I want to thank the pioneers in this room who saw the potential for structured data, required that it be used, made it available, and then developed tools to turn the mountains of data into insights. I want to congratulate the jurisdictions that have already adopted or have begun to adopt XBRL, and I encourage others to join in the movement. To fully realize the potential of XBRL, I think we still need, number one, an intense focus on data quality by all of the members of the financial reporting ecosystem. 2, I think we need continued widespread adoption of XBRL around the world with centralized repositories in appropriate regions. Third, I think we need ongoing education about XBRL for both new and experienced accountants and analysts. And fourth, I think we need increased awareness of enabling technologies and success stories, which I know this conference has been designed to do. I think XBRL has already significantly enhanced financial reporting around the world, and I expect that trend to accelerate as we continue to pursue these challenges and opportunities. Thank you for your attention.